Good afternoon, this is Tanya Aarons coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. I'm making this video for the Mike Cavalli show. Following on from my video about angels, I want to tell you that angels come in all shapes and forms, and some of my angels have been human, and I call them Earthangels, because through sometimes almost supernatural and magical intervention in times of extreme stress and danger, my life as I know it, I have to laugh because some of my life's been quite bizarre, people, was actually saved by sometimes quite unusual experiences. So anyway, this particular experience was back in 1994. My marriage was breaking down, in fact had broken down for quite some time, but I'd been in denial about it. In the way of women with young children, we sort of try to hold things together against our better judgment. So I spent much of 1994 visiting various psychics, psychic mediums. So one particular psychic medium I saw was a man who's quite well known here in Brisbane called Jason McDonald. And he actually told me that my marriage was over and that I was holding on rather needlessly, and that I would need to save my money because I was going to be cast into quite dire poverty for quite some time. Well, he got that absolutely accurately. I went to see him 2 or 3 times, and the final time he was very honourable and decent, and he said to me, "Stop coming to see me, Tanya. You know that your marriage is over and there's no way out of it except to leave and, take control back over your life. And you're wasting money on psychic mediums because the reality is this is your destiny and it's the path you have to follow. And there's no sense holding on to a dead marriage, especially emotionally, spiritually, financially, and ultimately almost physically. Well, marriage, he said, you need to move on." And denial's a long river in Africa, and I'm a stubborn wench. So I thought, if there's just one psychic medium who tells me that my marriage is redeemable, I'll hold on that. And that probably a lot of that came from, my religious background as well. So I took Jason McDonald's advice. I didn't go to see him again because he was in those days he wasn't quite so expensive, but I actually did go and see him again about 10 years ago, by which time he was a lot more expensive and he'd lost a lot of his abilities, which is a shame because he was a very, very talented psychic. Hopefully it was just an off day. So having said that, because I was in denial and I was quite traumatized and distraught, and I was under full-blown spiritual, psychic, mental, emotional, and ultimately physical attack, which is the subject of this story, I went to see yet another medium. I saw about 6 mediums in that time frame. So I went to see this lovely, lovely woman whose spiritual connection or guidance, or I don't know where she got the information from, but literally saved my life. And so that's the subject of the story. So her name was Anastasia, which I was struck by because it's a very Russian name, Anastasia. Anyway, I remember vividly when I went to see her, it was in a suburb near where I lived called Capalaba, here in Brisbane. And I had never seen this done before because I'd heard, of course, I'm raised as an occultist with spiritual background, as well as being a Jew. So it's complicated, people. But I had heard about crystal balls, that people could scry with crystal balls. But I had never seen this done before. And so when I went to see her, she was actually gazing into a black obsidian or black onyx ball. And it was completely black. It was not transparent, there was maybe a little bit of reflection on the edge of the ball. And so I was more fascinated with how she was seeing things into a black ball. And it almost felt, to my mind, like a little bit sinister. I thought, maybe is this woman satanic? Is she evil? No, she was none of those things. But it just kind of threw me a little bit, this black ball that she was communicating with the spirit world via that medium. So I sat with her, and she, would you believe it, my battery is dying. I'm going to run and get my cord so I can continue this video, because I'm never quite in the real world, as you can tell. I'm always not quite organised, and here it is. So I'll plug in here in my kitchen and we'll continue. Sorry. Oh my goodness. So here we go. So we continue. So this lovely woman, this very, very amazing psychic, was gazing into the black ball, and she said to me, one of the first things she said to me was, your marriage is over. And in actual fact, it ended quite some time ago, but you've been holding on. And I said, well, yes, because, I have young children, and, I have a business and a home and a swimming pool and 2 cars and all these material things. I said, but my main worry is I don't want my children to have a broken home like I came from, because it's very damaging and debilitating and hard on the psyche and damaging. She said, look, I understand that, but the best thing for you is to just get out and move on, and your children are resilient and they will cope. Well, that was the philosophy that we operated under, and children are resilient, but I was put through hell on earth. But for the purposes of this video, I won't go into that, because that all happened quite some time later in 1995, 96, 97, 98, we can write off the 90s. But anyway, so, but she said to me, this woman, Anastasia, and if you ever see my video, this video, and you're out there, Anastasia, I thank you from the bottom of my soul, and may all the gods bless you for eternity, because what you told me saved my life and was completely, utterly, chillingly accurate. So we sat there in the room, her and I, and she's looking into this ball, just studying it, and she says to me, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're in danger. And I've come from a very violent background, childhood, lots of abuse, which again, we won't go into the minutiae of that. So danger's kind of my middle name. And so I was like, oh yeah, really glibly, oh yeah, okay, yeah. But I sort of sat there thinking, what kind of danger? What on earth? I thought, is this woman on drugs? What you talking about? What you talking about, Willis? So she looks at me in all seriousness. She says, I need to tell you this, and I'm hesitant to tell you because it sounds so bizarre. But she said, your husband is going to try to kill you. And I said to her, well, he's always been very sadistic and emotionally cruel, but he's never been physically abusive except once when we were first married, and I nipped that in the bud straight away. She went like, what, you actually stayed with this man? I went, well, I bred with him too, like, really, you know. But I said I was young and I didn't know any better. And there but for the grace of God went I. So she said to me, he may have never been violent for the last, 10 years, because I was with him for 10 and a half years. She said, but I'm telling you, there is going to be violence. And I want you to listen to me now, because I can see you kind of don't quite believe it, like you're not wanting to believe it. Well, who wants to believe a thing like that? Nobody can envisage that someone is so malevolent and so evil that they would manipulate and orchestrate your death or your potential death. So I'm still looking at this lady and I'm staring at her crystal ball thinking, I don't see anything in this ball. How is she seeing this, More out of curiosity. And in the way, because I'm a trauma survivor, I do have a tendency of disassociating and leaving my body, and I'm not always tuned in. Like, I listen, I'm a good listener, but I'm not always mentally there, which is very frustrating to my daughter and very close friends, because they will sometimes have entire conversations with me and I'm not there. As my my therapist tells me, I'm interdimensional, multidimensional, but all humans are. But so what happens is I'm studying this lady with the ball and I'm starting to think, is this even for real? Is she serious? As my logical mind is like, this can't possibly be. But then I do know, it's very unusual for a medium to tell you that you're about to be murdered. Like, it's actually kind of unethical and not usually done. So I'm sitting there thinking, I could see this woman was highly intelligent and that she was struggling with telling me this news. So I knew that she was seriously wanting to somehow give me the information that would make the difference between me living and dying. So she informs me very, very bluntly. She says to me, you're going to be attacked and strangled. So I'm looking at her thinking to myself, oh yeah, whatever, loony tunes, as you do, because you're in denial. She says, listen to me, Tanya. I implore you to listen to me. She said, my guides are telling me in no uncertain terms. She said, I see hands on your throat and you being strangled. And this is what you need to do. So at this point, a kind of chill of recognition went through my whole body and I knew she was telling me the truth. And I said, okay, what do I have to do to survive this? She said, there's no guarantee that you'll survive. She said, it's going to be that close. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, oh my God, literally. And kind of hoping in the back of my mind that she was just some crazy person and it wouldn't actually happen, right? So she says to me, when this person is strangling you, she said, I know you're a fighter and you're a plucky woman and you've come from a background where people were quite violent and angry and aggressive and assertive and fought. And she said, and you have fought. She said, I see it, even in your childhood. She said, you were a real little tomboy and you were always fighting. And I nodded yes, She said, this one time in your life, I'm begging you, do not fight back. If you fight back, you will assuredly die. And I'm just amazed, And I said to her, well, what do I do? How do I get through this? She said, you're going to forget. She said, very quickly after you leave this reading, you're going to almost forget about it because your mind doesn't want to accept it. She said, but I want you to remember this. She said, when it happens, she said, I want you to go very quiet, not to kick and punch and fight. She said, because you'll be in a position where you will be in more danger then. Didn't make sense at the time. She said, I want you to go within, call upon your angels. She said, I know you believe in the angels, and I nodded, And she said, I want you to stare into this man's eyes. Like, just look right back at him and hold his gaze. She said, because he's not in control of his actions, she said, and it will mean the difference between life and death. And she said, and I'm sorry, she said, I can't guarantee the outcome. It will be up to you and your angels. So I said, thank you very much. And I paid her and I left. And I went home, and of course I rang my, close friends and told them, and we all thought it was the most strange thing. And I said, look, I don't know the lady. She might be on drugs. She might be dealing with something satanic. I said, it's the most negative reading I've ever had in my life, apart from telling me I'm going to get a divorce, which everyone agreed. I said, I've never been told that I'm going to die, potentially die like that before. So only a few short months later, I was in my business, and I had a chicken takeaway shop in Kapalaba with my husband. So we sold, rotisserie chickens and that. And I was talking with my staff after work, as we often did in the evenings. We would hang out, and I kept getting phone calls from my ex-husband, because at that point, I was still living in the house, but I had told him the marriage was over as of the 1st of January 1995. So this was 2 weeks later. I'm pretty sure it was the 16th, so it was 15 days later. The 16th of January 1995. So my husband rang twice. He said, my soon-to-be ex-husband said, you've got to go down and rescue a friend's daughter. I said, what's wrong with her? Why does she need rescuing? He said, well, she's called me, and she's sitting on the side of the road at a suburb called Wynnum, which is a 10-minute drive from Kapalaba, and she's stuck, and you need to pick her up and bring her home. I said, what's gone on? Oh, the boyfriend and her have had a fight and she's in danger. I said, well, that's not actually my problem. Why do I have to go? And he said, well, her parents aren't home. They're on holiday down in Melbourne, so she's frantic. She's rung, wants you to go. And I thought, well, there's nothing unreasonable about that. But I said to him, why don't you go? You're a man. I said, I've been working all day. We've finished the shift. I'm just sitting here with, our employees. He said, no. He said, you have to go. He said, I'm not going to get involved. She needs a woman's support. And of course, me being all feminist and earth mother and wild, I said, okay, Anyway, I was still chatting, having a cup of tea with my staff, because I didn't consider it an emergency or anything. And he rings me a second time, says, have you left yet? And so I start feeling a little bit suspicious that there's so much pressure about going to get this girl, right? And I said to him, yes, I'll be leaving soon. What's all the drama and chaos? Oh, it's just that she's waiting and she wants to know that you're on the way. And I said, I told you I'm coming. And I'm true to my word. When I say I'm coming, I'm coming. I said, I'm just shutting up the shop now, blah, 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 which we did. We shut up the shop. I drive to rescue this girl. She was a daughter of Jewish friends of mine from the Jewish community from our temple. So, you know, so I knew her well and trusted her. So, little did I know. So I go to pick up this girl, and her name was Louise. I won't give her surname, which should have a different name now, so it doesn't matter, but I'll just say Louise. So anyway, so I go to pick up Louise. I get there, and she says, we have to go back to the unit. I've got no shoes. He's got my purse. I need my shoes. I said, you're in danger. You don't need your shoes, love. She goes, no, we need to go back. We need to get the shoes. And me and all my naivete thought, okay, I'll take her back and she'll pick up her shoes and whatever she needs and we'll leave peacefully. That was the plan, right? So we go back to this unit in Wynnum, and the boyfriend meets us out at the front gate, and I said, look, Dale, I said, we've come to pick up Louise's shoes. I don't want any trouble. You know, she's going to stay with me for the night, and then you can sort things out tomorrow and discuss things when you've all calmed down. And he was like, okay, you know, it seemed quite reasonable. So we follow behind him. Louise follows after, and I trail after. And we go up. They were on the first level of this apartment building, so we go up the stairs. And just outside their door, just no sooner he opened the door to their apartment for her to get her shoes, allegedly, which was all part of their plan. They'd lied, both of them, evil little, well, we won't swear for the Mike Cavalli show, but you know what I think of them. This young man, who would have been 19 or 20 at the time, fully attacked me. Anyway, he threw me into a metal balustrade, and which caught me across my breasts, which hurt a lot. Anyway, I slumped to the floor, and because I'm in denial and also bloody minded, I stood back up, and so he threw me back into the balustrade again, threw me into it about 3 times. And then he got me by the throat and held me backwards over the balustrading and was choking me. And I couldn't even scream, anymore because he was choking me. And on the apartment building right beside his building, there were people on the balcony watching, having a party, thinking it was funny or entertainment. For all I know, this boy had told them, I'll put on a show for you, and had a bet with them. I actually think they were all involved, because not one of them said to him, stop, or, what are you doing? No one called the police. And it was just like, it was the most bizarre thing of my life. It was like a floor show for them. They all stood there laughing, drinking, while I'm being strangled to death, literally almost to death. And by the way, I'm an asthmatic, so, it wouldn't have been that hard to finish me off, because I already have breathing issues. So I'm staring into this young man's eyes, and something in my brain flashed back to this medium Anastasia warning me. Look into his eyes, don't scream, don't kick, don't punch, don't fight back, you will die. And then in this moment I understood why it was dangerous, because I'm leaning back over this balcony, and I knew if I kicked him in the testicles, if I missed or if I didn't kick hard enough, he'll just push me and I will break my neck if I fall backwards. It was only 1 floor up, but it would have been enough at that angle to snap my neck or break my bones or something. I wasn't going to take the chance. So I'm lying there thinking, well, I'm going to die now. And there's a moment that comes when you come that close to that realisation that you're running out of breath and there's a maniac choking you and you're hanging off a balcony, and meanwhile you can hear the laughter and everyone's saying, finisher, ha, thinking it was a game, right? So there was that trauma added to it. And I'm looking into this boy's face and I'm like thinking to myself, okay, today, this moment, this is how I die. I'm going to die. And I remember thinking, well, thanks for that, angels. As usual, you know, you've put me in a really bad position here, but this is the first time where it's been at the hands of another human being where I'm going to die now. So, and by the way, it wasn't the last time. It happened 2 more times that I was attacked and strangled, and the 2 other occasions were actual, you know, they were sexual partners or lovers or, casual, whatever. It's too sickening to even try and admit that they were intimate partners, but they were intimate partners. But this boy, I later found out, had been paid $50 by my ex-husband to rough me up. Of course, they hadn't factored in that he would almost kill me. And again, I couldn't prove it, but my friend later said to me that he had seen my ex-husband hand over $50 to the young man and Louise, and he'd wondered what the $50 was for. And later on that evening, we found out. So, and I know this sounds completely bizarre, but it happens to be the truth. So anyway, staring into this young man's eyes like this, literally thinking, I'm going to die now, this is it. And I had resigned myself. You know, I'd run out of breath and there was no point in fighting. I'm going to have to accept my fate. I saw some sort of shift or glimmer in his eyes. He had cold blue eyes that were literally swirling. So I think hindsight 2020, I didn't know much about people who used drugs in those days. I mean, I grew up with a lot of, you know, people in my youth who were pot smokers. I had never done drugs, but I knew what they looked like when they were stoned. But this guy's eyes, this young guy's eyes, were swirling. And I'll be honest with you, he looked like he was under some kind of demonic influence. Like, it wasn't just that he was angry and wanting to kill someone, and it might as well have been me because, I was coming to take his girlfriend's shoes and bring her to safety to my house, so I was a target. It was more than that. He was completely overtaken by either drugs or something evil, or both. He'd opened some vortex in his brain to something demonic. So I remember looking into his eyes and seeing these spinning eyes, which is really frightening, you know, and I could feel his breath on my face as he's choking me. And it was the most intimate way to die. They say actually to strangle someone is actually one of the most barbaric things because it is so intimate. You know, you're face to face, and, you know, as I said, I could feel his breath, I could see into his eyes. So I'm looking into his soul, and all I could say to myself, inside my mind, of course, because I wasn't able to speak, was, dear God and the angels, what a way to die. Like, thanks for nothing, guys. Thanks for nothing, but I guess if this is my fate, this is my fate. And all I could think about was my young children. And I was frightened for them because my family of origin were child abusers, and I was afraid that my children would end up being raised by them because they at that time had regularly threatened, you know, you're leaving your husband, we're going to take your children. You know, those threats had already started even back in 1994 before I'd even made the decision to leave. You know, you can't make it on your own, you're crazy, you're stupid, you're weak, you're a terrible mother. None of those things were true, but I had almost being gaslighted and brainwashed into believing that. So by the time I'm being choked by this young man, I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe it's good that I die because my children have a chance at a better life. But by God, I don't want them to go to my mother or my husband because they're not safe with them, because I wasn't safe with them. And here I am being murdered by someone else. How unexpected. Not knowing at that time that that young man had actually been paid to kill me, or rough me up. So I'm looking into this young man's eyes, like this, hanging backwards off a balcony, which is a very vulnerable position. And I'm asking my angel, I said, all right, okay, I accept it now. This is the end. What can I do? My poor children. And almost instantly, and maybe it was because he could see the acceptance in my face or in my eyes, because we were eyeball to eyeball, almost instantly I saw his eyes stop swirling, and it's like he almost recovered himself momentarily, like this, and looked at me, almost like he himself realised that what he was doing was completely wrong. And he took his hands off my throat, and of course I'm choking and gasping and slumped at the bottom of the, down at the balcony, and feeling my breasts because they were very painful, because he'd thrown me into, they were the first to be injured, and feeling my throat and coughing and trying to get oxygen in. Quite frankly, after that event, I should have been hospitalised or at least checked medically. And I do blame that event for ending up being diagnosed, and I wasn't diagnosed till 2003, with obstructive sleep apnea. Like, I'm quite sure that something to do with the way the choking around the throat had damaged my airways and caused, some kind of damage. I'm not a doctor and I can't prove it, but I did ask a specialist, and he said it certainly wouldn't have helped my my throat and my airways in that situation. And also residual trauma can leave you with health problems, not just mental but physical as well. So I'm telling you this story. It's deeply traumatic and difficult story to tell, but I want women to know that, I want not just women but men watching this to know, because there are good men out in the world, and I do have the good fortune and the grace and the blessing of being surrounded by good people now. In those days I wasn't. But I want you to know that there are angels out there. The angels that, I don't know what they did or how they did it, that stopped him from finishing me off and killing me, because I was very close to death. Something switched off in his brain, something changed. I saw the change in his eyes. Something intervened. So someone, there was a young woman next door to them, living next door to them. I don't know if she'd called the police, but someone had called the police, because after after choking me, he went in to the apartment with the girl and shut the door. And I felt terribly conflicted, because it was my job to protect her and bring her home with me, and I couldn't. I'd been victimised instead. And I worried about her, but I thought, there's nothing I can do now. She chose to go in with him, and also did not try to protect me during the violence. So I was really angry and distressed about that I had been used in that way to save her ass, and then she left me for death. So I very gingerly stood up, and I proceeded to leave that building, and a young woman came out. My throat hurts telling this story. It's amazing how memory can affect you. Anyway, a young woman came out of the apartment next door, and she was heavily pregnant. about to pop. She looked about 8 months at least. Very, very big with baby. And young, probably 19 or 20 herself. And I was a young mother, I married very young, so, no judgment there. I just looked at her with her baby, and she came out to me, and she had a massive big black eye. And she said, "Oh my God," she said, "are you all right?" And I said, and I could barely speak, it was all hoarse and raspy. I said, "No, I'm not. I nearly died. I thought I was going to die." She said, "I know, I heard everything." She said, "I'm sorry I didn't come out earlier." She said, "But I've already been beaten today, and as you can see, I've got a big black eye." And I said, this place is just like the Wild West. I said, the people across in the building, I said, watched the whole thing like it was a floor show. She said, "Yes, I know." She said it was sick what they did. They had all gone in once I survived my near-death experience. One of my first near-death experiences at the hands of a man. So I looked at her and I said, "Who's beating you when you're big with baby, about to deliver a baby?" She said, "My boyfriend." I said, "Well, I've come here to save my friend's daughter." I said, "But she's gone in with that maniac and there's nothing I can do." I said, "But you need to get safe because you're about to have a baby." And she burst into tears and she said, "Yes, I know." And I said, "Would you like to come with me? Because I'm leaving now and we can't help Louise." But I said, maybe I can get you out of the situation. She said, "No, I'm all right, love. I just wanted to check that you were all right," because she said, "I've been sitting here thinking that, I've been a bystander and you would have died tonight. And I feel dreadful." And I said, "No, don't feel dreadful. Like, there's nothing you could have done with a big belly like that, She said, "I could have smashed him over the head with a bottle." I said, "Well, I wish you had, but," I said, "the guy was a maniac." I said, "I don't know how I've survived it, actually." She says, "I think he's on drugs." And I said, "I think so too." But I said, there was a moment there when he switched, and that's when he let go and I was saved. So I leave the building, minus both those young girls who were in mortal danger, feeling conflicted and a failure. Now bear in mind, I was young myself. I was 29, about to turn 30. It was the 16th of January and I turned 30 in April. So a few months shy of my 30th birthday. And I leave that building and I walk out to my car and I get in my car, and just as I'm driving away, a police car's behind me. And this is what I mean when I say I've been systemically abused by the Queensland government and Queensland police, because that was also really, really shitty. I pull the car over and I come out and I said, "Has someone called you?" And they said, "Yes, there's reports of screaming and someone being attacked." I said, "Well, that was me." And they look at me. Now, the bruising and the welts hadn't come up, but the swelling was already swelling up. And they said, "Oh, was it you, was it?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "I've been strangled and I nearly died. I have nearly died." And they said, "Well, what are you doing driving around in your car then?" I said, "Well, I was about to go home." And they said, "Why are you going home, not reporting it to police?" And I said, "I don't actually know why." I said, my instinct is I want to go home. I've got young children. My marriage is over. I'm, still in the family home, and I fear for my children. And they said, "Well, come down with us." And they should have really pressed the point, right? Like there should have been a police report, and my husband should have been arrested for attempted manslaughter. And maybe I might have, got my home and my business and been much better off. But fear, driven by fear from being attacked and strangled, I let it all go. So these police said to me, where were you when you were being strangled? And I said, look, I don't know the address, but if you go, it's in through that building and they're on the first floor, blah, blah, and you'll have to door knock. I don't even know the number of the apartment. I said, I need to go home to my children. And they said, well, you need to report this, which they were quite right. It should have been reported. And I said, there's no point. I said, because half the time in the court system, they get a slap on the hand, they get away with it. I said, I'm alive, I'm fine. You know, I should have gone to a doctor and had all the injuries, you know, all the bruising, registered and photos taken. That did happen with the second strangulation, by the way. There was a little bit more duty of care. But with the first one, I had no evidence to prove that I'd been attacked and strangled, except that on the very next day, this happened on a Sunday evening. So on the Monday night, I was at my shop at work because my husband demanded that I go back to work, and literally the welts and the swelling were right across. Any moron, you know, could see that I had been strangled. So, and my employee, who was a dear friend, a good friend to me, a kind young man, we've remained friends for the last 30 years, he came to the shop to have dinner. So I called him, I said, you need to come, you need to see what Michael's capable of. I said, he's behind it. I said, I can't prove it, but I know he's behind this. So he came and he took one look at my throat and he went, oh dear God, Tanya, you need to go to the hospital, you need to report this. I said, no, I said, if I report it, I said, my children are in mortal danger. I said, that young man knows where I live, he's been to my family home, knows where my business is, and he's in collusion with my husband. I said, it's too dangerous. I'll lose my children. I was constantly in fear of losing my children. So I didn't report it, and I regret that to my dying day, that I didn't report it, that young man got away with it. So day 3 after the strangulation, this is how I found out very quickly that it was all perpetrated and manipulated, not just by my husband, but my own mother. Day 3, it was a Wednesday. My mother arrives early in the morning. My husband had driven to pick her up from Wellington Point, which is a neighbouring suburb, to our home in Birkdale, where I was still living in the marital home, but I had moved downstairs in the last prior 2 weeks. And she stands with my ex-husband in our rumpus room underneath the house, and she takes one look at me, and now I'm still swollen, and now all the bruising and welts have come out. So it's quite obvious that I wasn't lying, that I'd been strangled, right? And blind Freddie could see that. Or maybe not blind Freddie, because you'd be blind, but you know what I mean. So I have to laugh, because I do have a macabre sense of humour. So anyway, they're standing in my living room, in my rumpus room, and my mother stands there, and she looks at me and she says, well, you deserve that. We wish we'd beaten you years ago. Maybe we could have controlled you. And I said to her, get the fuck out of my house. I said, number one, I said, what was there to control? I got married at 19 and 1 month, a child bride virtually. I said, I've never done anything wrong. I've never been unfaithful. I haven't done drugs. I haven't drunk to excess. All I've done is be a wife and a young mother. I was a mother of 2 baby girls by the time I was 22. I said, I've had no life at all except live with this man who treats me like garbage, and you have the nerve to come to my home as my own mother and tell me I deserved this? She said, yes, you're always sticking your nose in other people's business and you should just butt out, and maybe if you'd butted out you wouldn't have got strangled. And that was her rationale for what happened to me, right? And I said to her, well, actually, Mum, I said, I didn't want to go to that place in Wynnum. I said, I was still in my shop, closing up shop with my staff members who can validate me. I said, and Michael twice rang me and demanded I go. And I said, and if he was half a man, I said, he should have gone to pick up Louise, not put me in danger. I still was in denial about the fact that he was behind it, right? So anyway, they both kind of snare at me. And I said to my mother, I said, no, get out of my house. I never want to see you again as long as I live. Famous last words, because I kept forgiving the evil cow. But anyway, that's other stories, we won't go there. But that's when the penny dropped, and I realised that these people, my family, my own family, my former husband and my own mother, basically were not satisfied until I was dead. They wanted me dead, without a word of exaggeration or a lie. So how did I respond to that? I spun out into terrible trauma activation and depressions, which lasted many, many years. I've only, in recent years, come home to myself after, 20 years of therapy. Since 2016, have been able to get free of all my psychiatric medications, when I used to literally be a zombie, drooling and shuffling on heavy psych meds, because I was strangled not once, but 3 times. And each time, I did not receive any real support from either Queensland Police, the Queensland Government, certainly not from family, partners. I did have 2 friends who have stood by me for the last 30. One friend's been stood by me for 33 years. And they were my angels. They were my one saving grace, that I had at least that much support and love from other human beings. But quite literally, Anastasia, the psychic medium, and there's a little bit of a postscript to the story, because that woman saved my life. Her advice that came from the spirit world literally saved me a life. And she had said at the time, there's no guarantee that this will save you, but that's my advice to you, right? And it worked, hallelujah, it worked. So, postscript to the story. This event happened on the 16th of January 95, and quite some years later, I think it was around about 2000, my mother, who I had, after a period of estrangement, stupidly reconnected with, because my mother was nothing but pure evil. When I look at all the events in my life, she had never ever protected me, and in fact maliciously undermined me, actively tried to destroy me more than once. And it escalated after my stepfather died in November 1995 with these, after these events, it just escalated out of control, and she became more and more vicious. And, ultimately she did die of advanced Alzheimer's. And I did again go back to support her for the last 18 months of her life, visiting her in the old people's home, like a child naively wishing for a mummy to love her that had never loved me in real terms, had never been decent, had never been protective, yet I was still constantly playing that role, hoping against hope for a loving, protective, caring mother. Never happened. But anyway, around about 2000, my mother says to me, must have been on reasonably good terms, she says to me, I found a really good fortune teller. You must come with me. You'll go. You'll really love her. She's really good. My mother was very psychic in her own right, and a very talented witch. White witch, except when it came to her daughter. Uh, so, you know, there were spells I found in her home when the public trustee, gave me permission to clear out her home. I found 4 spells all lined up in her pantry with pictures of me looking very fat and unwell, because in those days I was on heavy psych meds, taken at an art gallery, and they were all lined up in jars. She had tried to trap my spirit in jars and prevent me from fighting for myself magically. So I'm not kidding you when I tell you my mother was evil. So there was that. But anyway, 2000, we were on relatively good terms. So she says to me, come and see this fortune teller. My mother had a German accent. She's wonderful. So, okay. I said, all right, I'll go with you. If nothing else, it's a nice cup of tea and a bit of cake, because we used to go to a tea room where they would give you a reading for $15 and you got tea and cake. I mean, how can you lose? It's a bit of fun, right? But no, we didn't go to the tea rooms. We went to another place in Adelaide Street in the city. So I go in there with my mother, and the lady calls out, hi Mitzi, because everyone called my mother's name was Gisela, but everyone called her Mitzi. That was her nickname, right? It's easier to pronounce than Gisela for most New Zealanders or Australians. So she goes, oh, hi Mitzi, how are you? My mother calls out, oh, I brought my daughter to see you, and I brought her for a reading. I've told her that you're excellent. And so the lady calls out, oh, that's lovely, Mitzi. Oh, it'd be nice to meet your daughter. And because I hear them having this interchange, and then I walk around in the corner into the room, and I just stopped and I stared. And there was this moment of recognition, right? And Anastasia looks at me. It had been quite some years, 15 years. She looks at me, and there was this flicker of recognition. We'd only met once, when she'd warned me how to protect myself. And I was kind of in shock, to be honest. And she looks at me, and very calmly she says to me, I always knew I would meet you again. And I looked at her and I said to her, did you? She said, yes, I've been expecting it. She said, but I wasn't sure it would happen. Meaning that we would meet again in the spirit world, right? And it was over my mother's head. She had no idea that I knew this woman. So my mother looks at me and she says, oh, you know each other? And I didn't trust my mother by that stage. Who would? You'd have to be insane to trust that person. But she was, after all, my mother, and I did love her in my own way. So I looked at her and I said, yes, we know each other. But I won't go into it, how we know each other. And I looked at Anastasia, and Anastasia looked at me, and she nodded. She knew. She knew. My mother, my monster, right? And so we sat down, and I think I had another reading with her. I can't remember what the reading was about or what she said at this juncture. She said, your mother comes for a reading with me every week. And I said, yes. I said, my mother likes to know the future. I said, I bet you she asks you about me a lot. And she said, yes, she's constantly, is my daughter showing up in the cards? Is my daughter? She was reading tarot cards at this stage. And I said, I still remember you reading for me with a black onyx ball, and it threw me a bit. And she said, oh yes. She said, yes, I still use the ball sometimes. Anyway, the miraculous thing was I got to meet the woman, and I told her to her face. I said, Anastasia, I said, you saved my life. It is because of you that I am still alive and my children still had a mother, at least for the last 15 years or so. And she nodded. So it was both a painful and poignant and beautiful experience. And I've never forgotten it. And that's how I knew that there was something. It's difficult for me to say my relationship with God has not always been holy. There have been almost, very, I won't even say almost, there have been very demonic influences throughout my life, almost running like a seam of gold in a clay pit in a quartz mine. And, although I became a Jew when I was a young woman at 19, my experiences in the Jewish community here in Brisbane were tainted, to put it mildly. So I have always struggled with my relationship with God, but I love God. I love the Holy One. I no longer look at God as, the Judeo-Christian idea of God as a person sitting on a throne overlooking everyone benevolently. I call myself now more of a universalist, in that I believe that God or the Holy One or that energy, the Creator, Great Spirit, I'm probably more comfortable calling God Great Spirit really than God, because we all know there's 5,000 gods and they can't be wrong, right? So my relationship with God has changed quite dramatically in the last, 30 odd years. I've been in Brisbane 33 years, so that has changed a lot. Too many attacks on my life, too much darkness, too much horror, too much trauma. But at the end of the day, I still have a strong faith that there is definitely someone up there looking after me. I don't even know if it's God or the devil or what that energy is, because they've done it often in the most bizarre, backwards, down the rabbit hole, upside down, running as fast as you can, backhanded ways. And each time I've been left, of surviving each attack, I've been left thinking, how on earth was that even possible? It was, each time was nothing short of miraculous, or maybe a little bit of luck, or maybe, reacting a certain way, like in that instance where I was told not to fight back, which is not my spirit. I call myself a warrior goddess, and I know that sounds crazy, but that's my spirit. It's obviously what I was cast down to earth with, to have a life of struggle and turmoil and literally have to fight for every aspect of my life. And I didn't always win. I don't consider myself as having triumphed completely, because my life is still not ideal. It's better than it was when I was 29, being choked by some maniac because he needed money for drugs, right? But it could be a lot better. But having said that, the gods of our understanding, the Holy One, blessed be their name forever and ever, has put me in the situations, not once, not twice, but many times. Even in recent years with, surgeries. The surgery in 2009 was another major, probably one of the most obvious near-death experiences. That's another story. We don't have time for that now. We're into this video for 59 minutes. But I realised in recent times, in recent years, that I had many near-death experiences, even as a young child. Many. I probably didn't recognise them for what they were, because I would just spiritually and mentally leave my body as I was slowly dying. One was of bacterial meningitis, Another one was nearly dying of whooping cough and measles when I was 4. You know, I actually wrote a list down of all the events of my childhood that should have killed me but didn't. And when I wrote it down, it's up there on Facebook, on my actual lifeline or timeline that you have on Facebook. Right, when I wrote it down, so much healing came from that alone, just when I realised how many events had nearly killed me from infancy right up to the age of 7. And so, half jokingly, I say, give me a child by the age of 7 and I'll show you the man, or in my case, woman, right? But it wasn't until I'd written it all down and put it into a coherent timeline and written down all, the actual facts of the matter, just dry facts, nothing embellished, that I realised, who the hell are you, Tanya Aarons? Or in those days, as a child, Tanya Phillips, to be alive in this paradigm, in this planet, in this world. And I wrote it all down for a shamanism group on Facebook too, and I had shamans say to me, like, my goodness, you have survived all of that. And we thought our lives were hard, because to be a shaman, you don't have an easy life. It's part and parcel of the gift that's given, is like the sacrifice is made. You're given certain abilities and gifts, and you're supposed to be in service to other humans, to guide them, protect them, heal them, serve them. And until you do, your life just doesn't balance out, because there's some sort of interplay between, the spirit world and the physical world, where a kind of a sacrifice is made. And unfortunately, in some people's walk on this planet, the sacrifice is you, right? It's not fair, it's not pleasant, but it's part of the training. Like, it's just part of the contract with the gods. So I'm smiling and I'm telling you this after this horrific, traumatic story, which some of you will think, my goodness, is she for real? Is she telling the truth? And I'm telling you, I'm smiling and I'm laughing about it now. It wasn't funny at the time. None of it is funny. But I'm telling you that I survived all of that to be here in this moment to tell you, literally, no one messes with the Tanya, which is one of my nicknames I gave myself, which is a tongue-in-cheek, kind of glib little in-joke, because the Tanya is a Kabbalistic text in the Chabad movement and ultra-Orthodox Judaism. It's actually a misogynistic tone, not very nice towards women at all, but I just see the funny side of it. It's like every little thing in life, including illnesses, psychic attacks, spiritual attacks, and physical attacks, sexual attacks, every little thing that was thrown at me. And that's one of the things one of my psychic medium readers had told me. They said, you're like one of those 10-pin pins in a bowling alley. No matter what throws you down, knocks you down, you get up again. But it took decades. I'm almost 57. It took decades and decades for me to fully get up again and fully integrate my core and my dark side with my light side, and fully embrace and accept life, because I had lived with death, for many years personally wishing to die. Even after those horrific attacks on my life, I was still kind of blaming myself, all these bad things happen to me, therefore I somehow must be a bad person. And it took me a long time to finally integrate and realise it was never my fault. I was never a bad person. I had only gone to rescue that girl, and in other incidences in my life, it was always, an attempt to keep my children safe. That had led to me being strangled. So I'm not a bad person and have never been a bad person, but I have a lot of rage. I had to put that aside because it blew out a gallbladder. I joke about that. It wasn't funny. That led to the near-death experience. I had to fight the day after that surgery against a team of doctors and nurses and other medical personnel. Fight like a demon possessed myself, a warrior goddess, for my rights there. It was appalling. So from time to time I get people who are vicious and nasty and ugly accuse me of being a victim, and that hurts because I'm no victim. I've had a lot of horrific things happen to me that should never have happened to any human being, even in very early childhood. But I am a survivor and a thriver. I'm in love with my gods. I don't know exactly who they are. They don't always tell me who they are. I've opened more to my spirituality as I've gotten older, especially in the since an event. I won't go into details about that for the purposes of this video, but an event on the 21st, the night of the 21st and the 22nd of August 2015. That was another event that I should not have survived, but miraculously did. And that was the event when I realised, after surviving that I just have to woman up, suck it up, buttercup, and make my life beautiful, amazing, nurturing, be everything for myself that my family and former husband and lovers were never capable of being for me. I realised then that I'm in this life completely alone, and have always been completely alone in real terms, but not really, because my angels, or the gods, or the Holy One manifested in so many microcosmic ways, have almost always protected me. And when they have failed to protect me, it was a test for me to show myself my own strength and power and innate spirituality. And although I did put a prayer out, please don't test me like that anymore, because I'm quite done. I'm quite fatigued and exhausted, and I'm done. I don't want to be tortured anymore. But here we are in a world of COVID, and the war in Ukraine and Russia leading us to the brink of nuclear holocaust, which terrifies me too. And I think ultimately there will come a time when I will no longer be able to survive or thrive or be a warrior goddess. And who knows what the future holds for any human or living creature on this planet. But I'm here to tell you that with enough love in your heart for yourself, for your children, if you don't have children, for your pets, if you don't have your pets or children, then for the earth, the land you stand on, wherever in the world you are, faith in the gods, faith in nature, faith in your own innate power to overcome anything. Without that, it's an uphill battle all the way. And I had plenty of faith. I had plenty of faith as a young woman. And sometimes it was bordering on the delusional, thinking that, you know, something majestic and holy and powerful would, you know, have my back. And it wasn't until I was put through those horrific traumatic experiences that I began to realise it's out there, the multiverse. It's both out there, external, the world we see, you know, the hologram, the matrix, and it's in here, or in here, our soul, our pineal gland, our heart, our gut, our sacral chakra, which manifests a foundation to build from. Mine got blown to pieces as a very young child, so my foundations weren't all that stable. But if you understand, you know, cosmic consciousness, the flow of energy, it's exemplified in yoga and in Tai Chi or Qigong, you know, that the Eastern philosophies understood energy. And you understand your place in the universe, and when you come to make peace with your spirit, your inner spirit, your what in Kabbalah we call neshama, our soul, right? The ruach, the breath of life, and neshama is your soul. By regard, when you come to terms and understand that, and you usually don't get to really fully integrate that unless you've died one too many times, or come close to death one too many times in one incarnation. And I can't even talk about how many other incarnations I might have had, but you know, each time is a growing and up-leveling and an experience. And I'm grateful for all of those, even though I'm still quite angry about the tests and the near misses and the not having enough support and protection in my life, that I had to be my own berserker, hellion, just like my Viking ancestry way back when. I had to incorporate all of those, every aspect of empowerment or strength that came from other ancestries, other cultures. I had to understand and accept into my being and say, this is who I am. You know, I joke that I'm a short, fat little hobbit woman walking around not flat-footed, I got high arches, but with very big feet on the earth. And that's another aspect of my being I had to incorporate and say, okay, I'm a woman, I'm on my own, I've suffered immensely, therefore I carry a lot of damage and a lot of emotional and psychic and mental damage. But I'm also a berserker, a hellion, a fighter. I'm also a lover of the multiverses. I'm also, you know, a mere mortal that can't always perceive what's lying ahead of me. And so without those psychic mediums that said, particularly Anastasia, who said you're going to be attacked and almost die and maybe will die, to have been my guide and to have been milestones, almost like when you're driving down a highway and you see little signposts going wrong way, go back, you know, or go here, turn left, turn right. Without those guidance systems, I would not have made it to be almost 57 years of age. So I leave that with you now. I'm an ordinary woman whose innate psychic abilities have been opening up since the 22nd of August 2015. I've got a long way to go. I don't know how much longer I have left to go on this planet to blossom and become, you know. In 2012, you can't see it, I've got long sleeves on, but I got a tattoo of the burning bush with God's name that says Bobo, not Bobo. It says AA Asher AA, which in Hebrew means I am whom I am becoming, or God's name, I am that I am. It was pretty audacious of me, given the events that were coming ahead for me, you know, in 2015, 2019, now the COVID paradigm. But it's all we are. We are all, each individual, a work in progress, a masterpiece. We're all co-creating with the gods our lives, one breath at a time, one moment at a time, one day at a time. And a moment can be an eternity, like the flickering in the eye of a homicidal maniac, or the love that you see in the eyes of a man who truly loves you. Can't really say I've had genuine, authentic, true love yet, but could happen one day. Or the love that you see in the eyes of a newborn baby, the love you see in the eyes of your pets. Those moments, beautiful, that balance out the ugly moments, the demonic moments. But even those demonic, ugly, life-threatening, dangerous moments that stretched out into eternity, they too, as horrific as it is and was, leave a mark that is, in a sense, a gift. Although, you know, in 1995 and 1996 and 1997, you know, the reverberation from that first attack was still unfolding like a tidal wave. I would not have called it a gift in those days. In those days I was still struggling to stay alive, while struggling to keep a roof over my children's head and keep enough food on the table and keep us safe, because it set a wheel of motion where we were harried out of home, many homes, 8 homes, and, you know, the trauma inflicted upon myself and my children was immense. So I survived all of that. You know, my daughters are 36 and 35 now, and they have their trauma issues too, from what was unleashed on us. Not quite to the same extent that I experienced, because my trauma issues related back to very early childhood. But I was unable to provide them a safer, more stable environment myself. So in that respect, I did fail, and it has left quite a bit of psychic damage. You know, I'm estranged with my younger daughter, and my elder daughter and my relationship is, in psychiatric terms, described as ambivalent. So it is what it is, you know. But I did my job as a woman, as a mother, and as a spirit. I managed to get them to survive and to you know, themselves now bordering on middle age, 36 and 35 in their prime, the prime of Miss Jean Brody. I did my best by them, even though it wasn't ideal, and had they had a mother that hadn't endured what I had, they might have had much more enriching, prosperous, happier lives. So it is what it is. There's lots of things that I have to forgive in myself where things could have been better but weren't. There was nothing I could have done differently at the time because I didn't have the emotional, mental or financial resources, and I didn't have the support. So that's enough about me. It's not a pity party, but I just want you to know the purpose of the story is angels are there all around us, and it can be something as random as a psychic medium stepping up and saying, don't fight back. And ordinarily I would never recommend that to anyone. Fight with every core of your being, but if you know that you've got no hope of surviving the fight, definitely work to go within. Thanks for listening. God bless you all. Stay safe. Stay true. Stay in love with you. Stay in love with your beloved ones, however they may manifest themselves. A family member, a pet, a plant in the garden, a goldfish in a goldfish bowl, a sunset. Love is the law, as Aleister Crowley did teach, even though he went a bit squidgy and satanic and weird, as many people do. You have to understand that there is only one real religion, spirituality, faith, and that is love. Love. May we know it, may we incorporate it, may we express it honourably, kindly, decently to each other and to our earth. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.